Auguste Mont-Saint-Fortuis, Dieppe, France. The beach is chaos. Black smoke curls into a red morning sky as British troops scramble for cover. Bullets tear through the air, waves crash against burning landing craft, and every few seconds another explosion shakes the shore. The invasion was supposed to be a test, a small rehearsal for the liberation of Europe. Instead, it's a disaster. Men are pinned down. Radios scream. The tide is running red, and then something moves through the smoke. At first, they think it's a wrecked ship drifting toward the beach. But it isn't floating. It's crawling. Out of the surf comes a steel box on tracks, dragging itself through the fire like it doesn't care. Bullets bounce off its armor. Grenades burst against its sides, leaving only soot and scratches. It grinds forward, slow but unstoppable. Inside, the crew can barely see. They breathe smoke and oil fumes, the air thick with heat and engine noise, but they keep going, pushing deeper into the inferno. On the beach, a soldier stares at the machine in disbelief. He mutters, "It looks like a shed on wheels." He's not wrong. It's slow. It's ugly. It's outdated before it even starts fighting. But it's the only thing moving forward. That day, the tank doesn't win the battle. Many are destroyed, stuck in the sand, or abandoned. But what it shows the world is something new, a glimpse of a machine that refuses to die, no matter how hopeless the fight becomes. They called it slow. They called it ugly. But this tank, this beast, would outlive every rival and save thousands of lives. How did the ugliest tank in World War II become the one generals begged to keep? The year is 1940. France has fallen. Across the English Channel, the last of Britain's soldiers are dragged from the beaches of Dunkirk, exhausted, beaten and half-starved. They've left everything behind. Guns, trucks, and nearly every tank the British Army owned. Britain stands alone. No allies, no armor, only resolve. Inside the War Office, panic hides behind polished shoes and stiff uniforms. Everyone knows that if Hitler crosses the Channel, there's nothing to stop him. Every field commander sends the same message. We need tanks, any tanks, but there's a problem. No one can agree on what kind of tank the army actually needs. Some want fast, sleek cruisers tanks that can dash across open fields. Others demand heavy infantry tanks, lumbering fortresses that can crawl beside the foot soldiers and crush through concrete. The debate turns bitter, and then one man ends it with a single word. Churchill, Winston Churchill, the new Prime Minister, remembers the trench warfare of the First World War, the endless mud, the slaughter, the stalemate. He doesn't want another war of waiting. He wants a machine that can punch through walls, cross shell craters and carry men into hell and back. A land battleship. When generals complain that such a tank would be too heavy, too slow, too complex, Churchill cuts them off. He says, "Build it anyway." Factories in Britain scramble to respond. Designs are rushed. Prototypes are sketched on napkins and cigarette cartons. Engineers argue over blueprints while bombs fall outside their windows. Every deadline is impossible, but no one dares stop. The project is codenamed A-22. Its goal is simple: create a tank that can do what no other can, cross trenches, smash bunkers and keep moving no matter how bad the battlefield gets. It won't be pretty, it won't be fast, but it will be unstoppable. Months later, a prototype lumbers onto a muddy test field. It's tall, boxy, and looks like it belongs in a scrapyard. Engines roar, gears scream, and the steel beast crawls forward, leaving deep scars in the earth. The officers watching exchange nervous glances. Some are horrified, some are amazed, and one of them says quietly, "It looks like something from another age. They're right." It's not elegant like a German Panzer, though it's not nimble like an American Stuart. It's something entirely different, a tank built for endurance, not beauty. In the months ahead, the machine will face its first trials. It will break down, catch fire, embarrass the very army that built it. But what's being born here is more than a tank. It's a philosophy. Britain can't win through speed or numbers. It can only win through stubbornness, through something that refuses to die no matter how battered or mocked it becomes. He didn't just want a tank. He wanted a moving fortress, a symbol of defiance built from bolts, armor, and willpower. And soon the world would see exactly what that meant. The plan was simple: build a tank that could survive anything. But the execution was anything but simple. The A-22 infantry tank, later to be named Churchill, was born not from genius but from panic. Britain had just survived Dunkirk. The threat of invasion still loomed. And the War Office wanted a brand new heavy tank immediately. Normally, a tank design takes years to perfect. This one, they gave it a few months. Blueprints were drawn overnight. Decisions were made by committees stacked with too many opinions and not enough engineers. Every meeting ended with another urgent modification. Armor thickness changed. Engine parts were swapped. Turret design was redrawn 3 times before breakfast. No one had the time to test anything. Every failure was simply marked, "Fix later." But later never came. Inside the factories, welders worked double shifts. Parts arrived late, mislabeled or bent. Engines misfired. Tracks fell off during assembly. The workers joked that the Churchill was being built, one argument at a time. When the first prototypes finally rolled out, they looked more like unfinished sculptures than weapons of war. The armor plates didn't quite fit. The engines coughed black smoke. The suspension groaned like an old ship at sea. Still, they had to test it. Officials and generals gathered near London to witness Britain's newest hope in motion. Cameras rolled, engines roared, and then it happened. Barely 100 yards into its debut, the tank sputtered, lurched forward, and died. Smoke poured from the engine deck. The mighty Churchill had broken down right in front of Parliament. One officer whispered, "Well, at least it didn't explode." No one laughed. Embarrassment turned to anger. The newspapers called it a disaster. The army demanded answers. Some wanted the entire program shut down, but not everyone gave up. The engineers, humiliated and furious, went back to their drawing boards. They fixed one problem, then another. Piece by piece, the monster started to work. For every breakdown, they learned something new. For every delay, they added another layer of armor. And beneath all the chaos, something strange was happening. The Churchill was becoming tougher. By the time new models rolled off the line, it could cross trenches no other tank dared attempt. Its thick armor shrugged off hits that would shred lighter vehicles. And though it was still painfully slow, it was nearly indestructible. The design was born out of frustration and failure, but it refused to die. Just like the nation that built it, it broke down in front of Parliament. But one day soon, it would roll through hell and keep going. Summer 1941. The first 14 Churchill tanks roll out of the factory, Britain's newest hope. Fresh paint still drying, engines rumbling like thunder. A crowd of officers gathers to witness the future of the British Army. The moment feels historic. Finally, after months of chaos, a working line of tanks, except they weren't quite working. As the convoy begins its first demonstration, the optimism fades fast. One Churchill lurches forward, backfires and stops. Another loses power halfway down the field. A third catches fire, black smoke billowing into the clear sky. Crewmen scramble out, coughing, wiping oil from their faces. By the end of the trial, 6 of the 14 tanks are dead on the field. The rest limp back to the sheds, overheating and leaking fuel. The watching officers stand in stunned silence. One mutters under his breath, "A steel coffin." The newspapers seize the phrase instantly. Britain's new tank, a rolling death trap. Public faith collapses overnight. For the engineers, it's humiliation. Months of sleepless nights, rushed deadlines and government pressure, all ending in smoke and failure. Some officials call for the entire project to be scrapped. Britain, they say, can't afford another disaster. But one man won't hear of it. Winston Churchill himself reads the reports and, instead of fury, issues a single unexpected order. Fix it. Don't abandon it. He knows something the critics don't. The machine isn't meant to be elegant. It's meant to be resilient. Every failure is another layer of armor, not metal, but knowledge. Engineers tear the design apart and start again. They fix the fuel system, reinforce the gearbox, and rework the suspension. Each version stronger than the last. And through it all, the tank keeps evolving, not into perfection, but into survival. When soldiers complain about the Churchill's speed, one officer jokes, "It may be slow, but it always arrives." That line becomes the tank's unofficial motto. It's mocked, doubted, and ridiculed by its own army. But beneath all that smoke and embarrassment, a monster is waiting to be unleashed. And Churchill, both the man and the machine, refuse to give up. Because in the darkest days of war, reliability isn't about beauty or glory. It's about what's still moving after everything else stops. And this tank, this ugly, stubborn box of bolts, was still moving. Churchill himself refused to kill his namesake. And history would thank him for it. August 19, 1942. The English Channel is grey and restless. An armada of landing craft cuts through the waves carrying thousands of men, and something new, something untested, on board the Churchill tank. It's heavy, cramped, loud, and this will be its first real battle. Operation Jubilee. The Allied raid on the French port of Dieppe. The plan is bold. Land fast, punch through coastal defences, seize the port. Prove to the world that the Allies can retake Europe. But Dieppe is a death trap. As the landing craft hit the shore, the first Churchills roll down their ramps and onto the beach, engines roaring, treads clanking, exhaust spitting black smoke. They drive straight into chaos. Machine gun fire rips through the mist. Mortars crash into the surf. The beach isn't sand, it's deep, shifting pebbles that grind and jam the tracks. One by one, the tanks begin to bog down. Some make it a few yards before their treads seize up. Others sink into the shingle, helpless and exposed. German guns open fire. The Churchill's thick armor shrugs off the bullets, but it doesn't matter. They can't move. Crews inside the tanks keep firing main guns, booming at bunkers just yards away. But without mobility, they're sitting ducks. Rounds ricochet off the steel hulls, sparks flying like fireworks. Men inside are deafened, bruised, but unbroken. A few Churchills manage to reach the seawall, a towering concrete barrier meant to stop vehicles. They ram it. Again and again. Engines screaming, treads grinding, but the wall holds. The battle turns into a massacre. Infantry pinned down behind burning tanks. Smoke thick as tar. Radio calls turn to static. The pebbled beach becomes a graveyard of steel. By afternoon, it's over. Of the 29 Churchills that landed, only 15 even made it off the boats. Most are destroyed or abandoned. The newspapers call Dieppe a disaster. Critics declare the Churchill obsolete, slow, clumsy, a failure. Even the crews who fought inside them begin to wonder if it's all been for nothing. But not everyone gives up. Among the chaos and failure, one officer, a man named Major Percy Hobart, studies the wrecks carefully. He sees not a disaster, but a lesson. The armor held. The guns worked. The tank didn't die, the terrain killed it. He realizes something simple but profound. Fix the mobility, and the Churchill could become unstoppable. He writes in his report, "It was not the tank that failed the battle. It was the battle that failed the tank." Everyone thought that was the end of the Churchill. But in truth, Dieppe was only the beginning. The beast had survived its baptism of fire. And next time it would be ready. Dieppe had been a disaster. But it wasn't the death of the Churchill, it was its rebirth. The reports came flooding in. Broken transmissions, overheating engines, tracks jammed with pebbles. Each line of failure became a blueprint for evolution. At Vauxhall Motors, the engineers refused to rest. Night after night, under flickering factory lights, they tore the tank apart and rebuilt it piece by piece. Every weakness became a challenge. Every breakdown a lesson. They started with the armor, thicker, stronger, layered in ways no enemy shell could easily penetrate. What had once been a steel box now became a moving fortress. Next came the heart, the engine and transmission. They redesigned the gearbox for smoother power, improved the cooling system, wired new hydraulics to give the massive machine just a bit more grace. And then they upgraded the guns. Early Churchills carried a small 2-pounder cannon barely enough to dent a Panzer. Now the engineers gave it a 6-pounder, and later a 75mm gun that could destroy enemy armor and fortifications alike. The beast was growing teeth. It wasn't fast. It never would be. But it didn't need to be, because it could go where no other tank dared, through mud, over trenches, across craters that swallowed lighter machines whole. For the first time, crews began to trust the machine beneath them. It started easily. It climbed hills. It crossed rivers. And when it took a hit, it just kept moving. In the factories, workers began to take pride in their creation. They stopped calling it a steel coffin. Now they called it the Iron Church. The Churchill had been mocked, broken and written off, but like the man it was named for, it refused to quit. Each new variant came with small miracles, better armor plates, stronger engines, new turrets and flamethrower systems. A machine that once failed its own parade now inspired confidence on every front. The evolution wasn't born in a lab, it was forged in fire, in mud and in loss. By the time it rolled into combat again, it wasn't just fixed, it was reborn, reforged into something unstoppable. They didn't just fix it, they made it a monster. And that monster was about to change the war. North Africa, 1943. The desert burns white under the midday sun. Wind howls across endless dunes carrying dust, the smell of oil and the echo of distant gunfire. For months, Allied tanks have struggled against German armor. The American Shermans move fast but crack easily. Lighter British vehicles sink in the sand or break on the rocks. Then, across the horizon comes a new silhouette square, heavy and slow. The Churchill. To the crews in North Africa, it looks almost comical. A rolling fortress lumbering toward battle. But in the sand and stone of Tunisia, that fortress finds its purpose. As the attack begins, German Tigers roar to life on the ridgeline, their guns thunder like gods. Shells slam into the Churchill's thick armor, shattering on impact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 direct hits. The tank doesn't stop. It just keeps crawling forward, smoke pouring from its sides, gun blazing through the dust. Inside, the crew can feel the impact through their bones. The driver's vision slit is cracked, the commander half blind from smoke. But they push on gear after gear, grinding toward the enemy. When they finally crest the ridge, the German line breaks. A Tiger retreats, its crew stunned. One British soldier watching the fight later said, "It looked like a shed on treads, but it fought like a bull." That day in Tunisia, the Churchill earned back every insult ever thrown at it. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't quick, but it was unstoppable. It could climb cliffs that broke lighter tanks. It could shrug off fire that tore others apart. For the first time, soldiers cheered when they saw a Churchill coming. What began as a national embarrassment was now a legend in steel. And as the engineers watched its performance in North Africa, one question started to take shape. If this armor could survive anything, what else could it carry? By 1944, the Churchill was no longer just a tank. It was a foundation, a canvas for invention. After Tunisia, the engineers finally saw it for what it truly was, a machine so tough, so adaptable, it could become anything they imagined. The factory floors buzzed like laboratories. Designers, welders, and mechanics worked side by side, sketching ideas that bordered on madness. They weren't building tanks anymore. They were building tools for every nightmare the battlefield could offer. First came the AVRE, the Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers. Where other tanks fired shells, the AVRE fired a monster, a 290mm spigot mortar called the Petard. It launched a 60-pound flying dustbin, a concrete-busting bomb that could blow open bunkers in a single hit. Walls that had stopped armies for years simply vanished. Then came the Crocodile. Same armor, same stubborn heart, but this one breathed fire. A trailer of pressurized fuel followed behind, feeding a flamethrower mounted in the hull. With one burst, it turned enemy strongholds into infernos. Soldiers who once mocked the Churchill now cheered whenever they saw a Crocodile roll forward, because they knew wherever that dragon went, the fight would end quickly. Next came the bridge layer, a mechanical miracle that could unfold a 30-foot bridge in seconds. Under enemy fire, the Churchill carried crossing points over rivers, craters, and trenches that had trapped tanks since World War I. No delay. No hesitation. The war kept moving, and finally the mine-clearing variants. Churchills fitted with rotating flails, rollers or plows that shredded minefields under their tracks. They advanced through explosions that would have ended any other vehicle's day. Each version was heavier, stranger, and more powerful than the last. And yet every one of them was unmistakably a Churchill, slow, loud, indestructible, loyal. The ugly tank that once failed its own parade had become a family of machines, each one crafted to solve a problem no one else could. From bunker buster to bridge builder, from shield to flamethrower, the Churchill wasn't following the war anymore, and it was leading it from steel box to flame spewing. Dragon, the Churchill was evolving faster than the war itself. If there's one thing the British do better than anyone, it's turning absurdity into genius. And nothing proves that more than this, a 70-ton tank that throws dustbins full of TNT. Meet the Churchill AVRE, the Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers. It wasn't designed for tank duels or open battlefields. Its purpose was pure, brutal engineering, to smash through anything the enemy built: concrete, steel, bunkers, bridges, fortifications. At its heart was the strangest gun of the war, a 290mm Petard mortar mounted right in the tank's hull. It didn't fire shells in the traditional sense. It lobbed enormous short-range bombs, massive cylinders filled with high explosives, affectionately nicknamed flying dustbins. Each one weighed 60 pounds and could turn a bunker into rubble with a single hit. Reloading it wasn't easy. A crewman had to open the hatch, lean out under fire, and physically ram another dustbin into the barrel. Madness and bravery in equal measure. Now fast forward to June 6, 1944. D-Day. The beaches of Normandy erupt in smoke and chaos. Machine gun fire rakes the sand. Concrete bunkers spit death across the waves. And through that storm of bullets, the Churchills roll ashore. Not sleek or graceful, just determined. Among them, the AVREs, they lumber forward, while everyone else is pinned down. Infantry take cover behind, their hulking armor as the Petard mortars begin to fire. Boom, a concrete wall vanishes. Boom, a gun nest disintegrates. Boom, a pillbox that had survived hours of bombardment finally collapses. In a single strike, the infantry cheer. For the first time, the tide begins to turn. Those bizarre dustbin-throwing tanks are tearing open paths no one thought possible. What had started as a joke in the engineering department was now rewriting the rules of siege warfare. Each explosion wasn't just destroying defenses, it was restoring hope. And yet, even with all that destruction, this wasn't the end of the Churchill story. Because while the AVRE was breaking bunkers, other Churchills, with fire bridges and mine flails, were fighting their own battles just miles away. These weren't just tanks anymore. They were problem solvers on tracks. And the AVRE, ridiculous as it seemed, proved one thing beyond doubt. When the world needs brute force and British stubbornness in equal measure, you build a tank that throws dustbins full of dynamite. But these weren't the last Churchills to fight. Italy, 1944. The rain doesn't stop. For weeks it pours down from the mountains, turning every road into a river and every field into a swamp. The Allies push north inch by inch through mud, rubble and ruin. American Shermans lead the charge fast, agile, confident. But the terrain has other plans. Tracks spin, engines choke, tanks sink halfway into the ground, their crews trapped in steel coffins made of mud. The front line stalls, and then in the distance comes a sound, a deep grinding growl. The Churchills are coming. They move slow. Painfully slow, but they move. While others spin and sink, these monsters crawl uphill through the sludge like beasts built from the earth itself. Mud coats their sides, engines roar, and somehow they just keep going. One British corporal put it best. When everyone else got stuck, we called for a Churchill. In one battle after another, the story repeats. Shermans bog down in the valleys. Churchills climb past them. They pull through rubble, drag infantry across flooded roads, and smash through walls that once served as fortresses. To the soldiers fighting beside them, the Churchills weren't just machines. They were symbols of stubbornness, of grit made metal. They didn't look heroic. They didn't sound heroic. But when you were pinned down knee-deep in mud, and the enemy's guns were closing in, you prayed for the sound of those tracks. Because if you heard that roar, you knew help was coming, slowly but surely. By now, the men who once mocked the Churchill's design had changed their tune. They stopped calling it ugly. They started calling it dependable, indestructible. And when you're fighting a war through rain, mountains, and death, ugly is exactly what victory looks like. Winter 1951. The hills of Korea are frozen solid white ridges cut by smoke and fire. The wind howls through shattered villages, carrying the echoes of another war. A new generation of soldiers fights across an old battlefield, and rolling among them is a familiar shape, the Churchill tank. Outdated, outclassed but not forgotten, built for a different war, yet somehow, here it is again. The same armor that crawled through French beaches and Italian mud now grinds its way up icy Korean slopes. Old engines rumble in the cold, paint chipped, armor scarred. Guns still steady. The Chinese positions ahead are dug into the hills, mortars, machine guns, hidden trenches. The Churchills advance just like before. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Snow bursts around their treads as shells crash into the frozen earth. One tank takes a hit, shakes, then steadies. Another climbs through a cratered ridge, firing down at bunkers built into the hillside. Through the smoke, their silhouettes look like ghosts from another time, relics of a war that was supposed to be over. But the Churchill doesn't care about eras. It was never built for glory. It was built to endure. Crews inside are different men now, younger, fighting under new flags, but the feeling is the same. When the Churchill moves, it brings courage with it. Every clank of its tracks is a reminder of what human grit can build, and how long determination can last. One officer wrote in his diary that winter, "The tank that outlasted the empire that built it still fights like it was born yesterday." By the time the smoke cleared over Korea, the Churchill had served across continents, cross wars across generations. It began as a joke, a failure, a relic of desperation, but it ended as something timeless, a monument to endurance in metal form. So how did an outdated monster become the symbol of endurance itself? Because some machines don't just win wars, they outlive them. Time has washed away the battlefields, the mud, the smoke, the fire. But in quiet museum halls under soft light, the Churchill still waits. Its armor is rusted now, tracks frozen in place. Yet somehow it still feels alive, like if you turned a key, it would growl back to life and keep crawling forward. It was never elegant, never fast. It didn't glide across the fields like a panther or roar with the speed of a Sherman. But what it did do was endure. From the cliffs of Tunisia to the beaches of Normandy, through the frozen hills of Korea, the Churchill tank carried more than just soldiers. It carried a nation's spirit, stubborn, resilient, unbreakable. It was a tank that refused to give up because the men who built it refused to. Every bolt and plate was a message. We will keep going. No matter how heavy, no matter how slow, one veteran said it best. The Churchill wasn't beautiful, but when you stood behind it, you felt safe. The Churchill wasn't designed for perfection. It was designed to survive. And somehow, so many years later, it still stands as a monument to that one-word endurance. They called it ugly. They called it slow. But it never stopped moving. And neither did the men who built it. If you thought this tank was unstoppable, wait till you see the one that could swim. Click here to watch. The tank that drove across the sea.